Okay, now we're going to read a parable, but I'm going to admit I don't really understand. So I want to read this. I'm going to try to comment on it the best I can. But this one is confusing to me. Always has been. I've read a few different opinions on it. I don't really get this one, so I'm not going to even pretend that I'm somebody you should ought to be listening to when it comes to the first part of Luke 16. Jesus told his disciples, "There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' So he's being fired. The manager said to himself, 'What should I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg.' So he's not built for physical labor, and he's too proud to beg. 'I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses.' So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, 'Yeah. The cat came out finally. I was actually able to get several videos done without cat interference today, but it was only ever going to last a short amount of time. Here's the cat again. Of course, it's the skinny one, the one that always wakes up first. That's Timber. She's the most active one, and she always wakes up first. She eats the least of the three, and she's the most active. Always has been. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' 800 gallons of olive oil,' he replied. The manager told him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it for 400. Now, I'm not sure if that means the extra 400 were dishonestly gained. Maybe it was a bad deal to begin with. That's what I've read. That's one possibility. I'm not entirely certain. I really honestly don't know what's going on here. This is a parable, I'll admit, is kind of beyond my understanding. I'm not a very strong economist, and even in our own culture, and certainly not very strong in first century AD economy factors either. So this was tough for me, I'll admit. Then he asked his second, 'How much do you owe?' 1,000 bushels of wheat,' he replied. He told him, 'Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended this dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light.'" Don't be quiet. You're going to hurt yourself doing that, cat. You're popping all over the place. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. I think he basically means here, now he says in a lot of other places, sell all your possessions and give to the poor. This would seem to go against that teaching, but I think it's all part of the same point, to use what you have wisely. Whoever can be trusted with very little can be trusted with much. That much is easy to understand, and it's true. If you can be trusted with very little, you can be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? Not God. You've proven you can't be trusted. And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No servant can serve two masters. That's about it. When I moved into this apartment, I became a lot more careful in taking care of the place than I ever was when I lived in my bedroom at home. I was also growing up too, just a simple fact of growing up. But if you can't be proven trustworthy with someone else's place or possessions, there's no reason to assume you'll be trustworthy with your own. That just makes you selfish. No servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And the Pharisees, who loved money, heard all this. And they were sneering at Jesus. Oh, man, yeah, you can. You can serve God and money. Sure. You can do that. What are you talking about, you crazy itinerant preacher? You don't have anything. You're just coping because you don't own anything. But he said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of men, but God knows your hearts. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight. We heard that word detestable a lot back in the days of Leviticus, when he was saying all the things that were detestable to God. Many of the things that we value highly are detestable to God. The law and the prophets were proclaimed until John, and he is dead now, of course. Since that time, since John came, the good news of the kingdom of God is being preached, and everybody is forcing his way into it. Everybody's trying to get a hold of that kingdom. And this, I think, has some connotations behind it of the various messianic movements that came along and tried to establish the kingdom by force. But it is easier for heaven and earth to disappear than for the least stroke of a pen to drop out of the law. Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery, and the man who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. I have no idea why that is here in this section. Maybe it has something to do with possessions. You know, if you're going to get rid of, if your wife is your possession and you don't value her, I'm not really sure. Like I said, there are times when I don't really, a lot of times actually, when I just don't really understand why Luke arranged his material the way he did. We're not done yet, though. We still have more to talk about this subject. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate, now purple, of course, was the color of royalty because it was hard to make purple clothes. They could only get purple clothes from purple dye, and purple dye came from, I think, like a rare oyster or something on the Mediterranean coast. I'm not sure exactly, but it was not common. So that's why purple has long been associated with the color of royalty, because for many, many years it was difficult to actually dye clothes the color purple, and only rich people could afford that. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores. This is the only character in any of Jesus' parables who gets a name. I don't think this is a real person. I don't think this is a real story. I don't think there really was a rich man and a beggar named Lazarus. I don't think this is recounting something that actually happened. But I do believe that Jesus is using, or maybe at least Luke, if not Jesus, then at least Luke, is using this name on purpose. As we'll find in the Gospel of John, there was a man named Lazarus whom Jesus raised from the dead. And I believe that this guy in this parable is named after Lazarus. It's possible that Luke just inserted that name here to hint at the actual Lazarus that Jesus raised from the dead. And maybe Jesus himself may not have given that name here, I'm not sure. We've already met Martha and Mary, who were Lazarus' sisters. And we're not going to meet Lazarus in the Gospel of Luke. Well, we won't meet him in the Gospel of John. But Lazarus was a very important figure. Apparently was very well known to Jesus. And this may be Luke's way of kind of hinting at what he's famous for without actually identifying it. It's suspicious to me. I don't really know. It is suspicious to me that the only character in the parables of Jesus who got a name was this guy, whose big point in the story is to be poor and die. And then the punchline is about someone coming back from the dead, which of course Lazarus did. So I'm guessing that there is a reason why that name was put in the story. Oh, well, it doesn't really make a difference to the story itself, though, as we're going to read it now. But it is interesting. However, I don't believe this story actually happened in the sense that Jesus is talking about two individuals who actually went through this. I don't think that's the case. At his gate, the rich man's gate, was a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. And dogs were unclean. And dogs today are pets. Everywhere you go, you find a dog. Every house you go into. I've been going to people's houses lately for our group sessions on Sundays. We've recently switched. We had for a long time just meeting at the church building itself. And then some time ago, our group, not with my input, I did not assent to this decision, but some time ago our group decided to start meeting people's houses again. Every house I've been into when we've done this has a dog, at least one dog in it. So we have dogs everywhere in our culture today, but dogs are unclean animals, and they would not have been house pets. In fact, they were jackals. They were scavengers. They were unclean, and nobody wanted anything to do with dogs back in this culture. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side, or bosom, as it's often called. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell, now the hell here is, we got to be very careful about this. In the original language, this word is Hades. So he's referring to the Greek concept of Hades, at least in the original Greek language as it's written. And this goes back to the Hebrew term Sheol. In Greek, the term Hades is equivalent, in the New Testament, is equivalent to the Hebrew, mostly equivalent, to the Hebrew term Sheol in the Old Testament, which is the land of the dead. Now, the Greek concept of Hades was a little different from the Jewish concept of Sheol, but they ended up using the Greek term Hades to communicate this thought of the land of the dead. So we have to be careful here. We're not talking about Gehenna. We're not talking about the lake of fire. That word hell there, we're not talking about that. That hasn't happened yet. The term that we have about hell, which is Gehenna, the lake of fire, that is still a future concept for the judgment after the resurrection. This is what's happening in the current time, in the interim, between the time you die and the time you're resurrected, which hasn't happened yet for anybody except for Jesus himself. There is a period of time in between, apparently, in which we're going to be in the land of the dead somewhere, which seems to be divided up into two partitions, where the saints go and where the sinners go, apparently, according to this. I don't know how literal this story is. Jesus is making a point, and I don't know if the point he's making is really about the afterlife. So we need to be very careful about using this passage as a doctrinal issue to establish, as a theological teaching to establish a doctrine about the afterlife. I don't think that's Jesus' point here. But he is drawing on the concept of Hades or Sheol, this idea that after death and before the resurrection at the end of the age, there is a period of time in which souls are interred in the land of the dead, wherever that may be. And apparently they are divided into partitions where the saints go in one part of the land of the dead and are comforted, and sinners go in another part of the land for the dead and are tormented, apparently. But again, let's not get too dogmatic about this, because I don't believe this is ultimately the point Jesus is making here with this parable. The rich man also died and was buried in Hades, or Sheol, where he was in torment. He looked up and saw Abraham far away, with Lazarus by his side. I'm not sure really either if the two partitions of Sheol can communicate. They say later on, Abraham said later on, we can't cross over. I'm not even sure if they can communicate. Like, I'm not sure if Jesus is telling us, I'm really not sure if Jesus is giving us an example of what the afterlife is like. I don't think he's meaning to do that here. I think we really need to be careful about using this as a way to preach about the afterlife, because I don't think Jesus is meaning it for that purpose. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me. So he's a Jew. He's the son of Abraham. He's a Hebrew. He's a Jew. Have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water, and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. And Abraham replied, Son. So he's a son of Abraham. This is a Jewish concept. We're not even really talking about Gentiles or anything like that at this point. He's talking to the Pharisees about wealth, about money. The point of this lesson is about wealth and money, not about the afterlife. Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. This goes back to the whole Some who are first will be last, and some who are last will be first. Same idea, being communicated in a different way. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. He answered, Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment. This guy apparently assumes Abraham has the power and the authority to do that. Clearly he does not. Which again, and Abraham doesn't dispute that. He just says, don't. That's not the way to repentance. So again, I don't think Jesus is giving us, or intending to give us, a literal description of what the afterlife is like or how it works. And Abraham replied, They have Moses and the prophets. Remember, these are Jews. Let them listen to them. He's not saying, no, I can't do that. He's not saying I can't send Lazarus. He's just saying, maybe he can, probably he can, but he's saying, they already have the testimony they need. Follow them. No, Father Abraham replied, he said, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. He said to him, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, which clearly this guy didn't either. I mean, clearly this dude did not either. They will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. That's the punchline. If you're just that determined to hold on to your wealth, nothing's going to change your mind. And that's the context of this discussion. I know that in our English Bibles we have these various section headings which kind of break the text up into chunks and parts. But in the original context, original manuscript, those didn't exist. Chapters, verses, section headings didn't exist. And this section all belongs to the whole idea of managing your money. But you do have it all in one chapter here, Luke 16 to 17. We do have it all in one chapter. But this isn't broken up into parts. This is all one thought about how to manage your money. And don't put the love of money first, which the Pharisees were doing. And they were doing it so much they were putting Moses and the prophets second. And they were not listening to them, and they were not repenting of what was going to lead to their judgment. If they didn't do that, they were going to end up in the lake of fire, or Gehenna, or Hades in this case, the current holding. I mean, those who are in Hades now will end up in the Gehenna later. You're not going to change your status after death. So this guy only has, if he's in Hades now, he only has Gehenna to look forward to. Those who are in Hades now are going to end up in Gehenna later. So, if you're not going to listen to the people, Moses and the prophets, who can give you the wisdom you need to not end up there, you're not going to listen even if Lazarus or Jesus himself comes back from the dead and tells you otherwise. Lazarus, I believe, is chosen as the name of this person. I don't believe this actually happened to Lazarus. I don't believe this story actually reflects something that happened to that man that we read about in John, or any other individual man. I believe it's just a story, a parable. I believe that name is used here because Lazarus is the name of a guy who was raised from the dead and was a very powerful demonstration of Jesus' authority, which we don't read about in Luke or Matthew or Mark, but it is mentioned in John. And I believe that Luke is hinting at that by including, even though he's already mentioned Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, he doesn't mention Lazarus himself. I believe he's hinting at that by using that name here. It's possible that Jesus himself did not give a name to the person in this parable, and Luke is simply putting that in there. It's possible. At any rate, wherever that word comes, however it happened, I believe that's the reason why the name Lazarus is used there. And it is suspicious because it's the only character in any of Jesus' parables that actually gets a proper name. And I think there's a reason for that. Jesus said to his disciples, things that cause people to sin are bound to come. So it's going to happen somehow or another. There is evil in this world. But woe to that person through whom they come. It doesn't have to be you. You see to it that you don't become that person. It would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his neck than for him to cause one of these little ones to sin. So watch yourselves. No one's going to force you to be that guy. It's going to have to happen. Evil is in the world. But you don't have to be the one through whom it comes. No one's going to force you into that. Watch yourselves. Do not be that guy. If your brother sins, rebuke him. And if he repents, forgive him. If he sins against you 7 times in a day, then 7 times, and 7 times comes back to you and says, I repent, forgive him. This is a variation on the teaching in the other Gospels about, how many times I have to forgive my brother 7 times, or 77, or 70 times 7 times. He's saying here, forgive him 7 times a day, if you have to. The apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. That's tough to do. That's hard. I can't forgive my brother that many times in one day. Help me, Lord. I can't do that on my own. He replied, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, excuse me, no, that's not what you say to the mulberry tree. Here's what you say to the mulberry tree. Be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it will be done for you. Suppose one of you had a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Would he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, come along now and sit down to eat? Would he not instead say, prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink, and after that you may eat and drink? Would he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, we are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty. Now he will say in other instances that the master will wait on the servants. I mean, it's not always that stark or that cut and dry. But in the end, this is what we're supposed to do. And in the end, if this is what human beings were created by God to do, they were created to be his image bearers. And he's still calling us to that. And when he recreates us in his image, he makes us again capable of being that. And in the end, that's what he wants us to do. We're basically just fulfilling our functions. We're doing what we were designed and created and are supposed to do.